it's Lee from coloringqueen.net, and today for my Asia in August colour along, I thought I would colour in Eriy's fairy tale colouring book from Japan. So there's my Asia in August. I'm not going to get through this picture today, no way, but I thought I would colour with my polychromos, seeing I barely use them, and I thought I'd give them an outing in this book today. I haven't really used them in here before. The picture on the other side I think was done with my Prismacolors, so yeah, we'll see how we go. I'm not a big fan of polychromos, to be honest. As you can tell, I rarely use them, so not really a big fan, but thought we'd just colour these pumpkins in with them, and if I don't like them, don't be surprised if I switch back over to my faithful Prismacolors. But I hope you're all doing well today. As most of you know, I've had a bit of a break. The reason being is, I think I mentioned last time that I sprained my left wrist. It's pretty severe sprain. It says it'll be about 10 weeks to recover, so we're in sort of 4-5 weeks. Anyway, I went and sprained my right wrist as well, so that's why I took the time off, to give my right wrist time to recover, because that's my dominant hand. And although it wasn't as bad as the left wrist, and I really don't know what is causing this and why they're both sprained, I really have no idea even how I did it the first time. But anyway, probably something in the garden or in the kitchen, I suspect, a big pot or something like that. But the my right wrist is now a lot better, so I've been colouring, but when I'm not colouring, I've got them strapped up and waiting for them to heal. So since we last chatted, I haven't really done much. I'm still waiting for my pesky qualifications to come. Can you believe this? It's been since May, and I've been waiting for, first of all, one state, New South Wales, and now I've been waiting for Queensland to issue my qualifications for 6 weeks. So I know, what's happening in the world is putting everything behind, but it really seems like a long time now, and a long time to wait just to get something so that you can get a job. Now, please excuse any traffic that you might hear in the background. I usually try and film earlier in the morning when there's less traffic, but I don't know, the day's got away with me already, and I have switched back to my Muji pencils. I've used them in Eriy's books before, and I really like these pencils. There's only 60 in the set. I've reviewed them before. They're just cheap and cheerful, but I like cheap and cheerful, and I like the Muji pencils on Eriy's colouring books too, so that's why I'm back with the Mujis. The polychromos with 2 sprained wrists, it was just a little bit too hard for me, and these are a bit creamier, and with the less colours, there's less decision making for me choosing a pencil. I just go with what there is and hope for the best. But since we last chatted, I've gone and got my hair cut. So I don't think you've ever actually seen a picture, but I hadn't had it cut since last December. So it was so long. It was sort of midway down my back, and I've just constantly been putting it up in ponytails and whatnot. So now I think it was about 6 or 7 inches off it, and geez, it feels good to have it all gone. I've been waiting because we've got mask restrictions here in Queensland at the moment, and I was kind of waiting until they were eased up, and then I just thought, I really can't take this anymore. You know what it's like when your hair is just everywhere, and I was just really sick of it. So I masked up and went and got it all chopped off, and it just feels so much better. And I'm glad I didn't wait any longer. I'm just happy to have it cut. So, the huge, exciting news. no, it's not really huge and exciting. It's just exciting for me. I don't get out much. But the other day when I was walking Buddy, so it's probably a couple of weeks ago now, because we haven't talked, as soon as we walked out the front door, our neighbour over the road, you see that there was something going on, and Buddy was really keen to go and have a look. And what it was a little tiny baby koala stuck in the fence. That's right. We've lived here for like 2 years or more now, and there's all these signs up everywhere saying koala crossing and koala seen here, don't let your dog off the lead, and you know, be careful of wildlife and all the rest of it. But we've never seen a koala since we've been here. We've seen lots of kangaroos, and even on the street, which I find bizarre, or in car parks, we've seen a snake at the IKEA car park at the stairs. We've seen, you know, wildlife. We've had blue-tongued lizards in our pool. We've got a resident possum, but never seen a baby koala, despite all of these, or any sort of koala for that matter, despite all of these signs around the area. So we're several blocks back from any sort of bushland, and there is a koala conservation strip near us. But this koala must have been severely lost to get into the residential area and then to get stuck in the fence. So what happened was Buddy's little friend Ollie, that's a tiny little like teacup terrier, he was on his little daily walk and he started sniffing at something at the fence, and his dad seen that it was a baby koala. And funnily enough, one of the other neighbours is a koala and wildlife rescue guy. And so he went and knocked on his door at like 6 in the morning and said, you know, there's a koala stuck in the fence next door. And the guy didn't believe him. He said, you know, no, there's no koalas around here. Never seen one in all my time, and, you know, you're wrong. And he said, no, truly, you know, there is a baby koala stuck in the fence. And so he came down and had a look, and yeah, of course, there was a baby koala stuck in the fence. And it was one of those chain fences too, so the poor little thing was really quite distressed. And so when Buddy and I arrived, there was like 3 people and trying to cut the little koala out, and then they got him out, and it was a little boy, and you know, took him off to the wildlife rescue place to get checked over. But sadly there was absolutely no sign of his mummy, and he was far too young to be on his own without his mummy. So I hope that she's okay. You know, you wish that they would sort of come around and tell you what happened, because he was just adorable, absolutely adorable, and it didn't look like he was harmed. He was just really distressed at the situation he'd found himself in. But the poor little thing, I don't know how he got into, like, where he came from to end up in the suburbs and stuck in someone's fence. But thankfully, all the right people were around who could quickly rescue him. So that was our excitement, and Buddy was very good. He didn't bark or anything to upset the poor little koala anymore. He just had a look at the little koala and he went, yes, okay, a little koala in a box. But so cute. And so other than that, we haven't seen any other little strange creatures. We do have a possum that lives up in our tree. But other than that, no other little creatures. But I do hope if another koala gets lost, it'll get lost with me, because I love them. They are adorable, but when you pick them up and hold them, which I have previously, they really are full of claws, and they will scratch you, and it's certainly not something that you would pick up, you know, if you don't want to get scratched to pieces. I noticed one of the wildlife rescue people, they had like a big cloth that they put around it to sort of protect them from their little claws. Even when they're little babies, they'll still give you a big scratch. But they're absolutely adorable. So other than that, we've still been sort of waiting to see David's family from Sydney, and Unfortunately, his mother went to hospital the other night. She was really sick, so they had to call an ambulance for her. And would you believe this? No beds at the hospital. She was sort of on a couch type thing in the hallway because the Sydney hospitals are really overloaded at the moment. There's a lot of cases on and a lot of sick people. And anyway, she walked past someone in the hallway that had COVID-19, and so long story short, David's mum and his brother are now in isolation for a couple of weeks, even though they've had the vaccine. So I just wonder if we're ever going to see them, because every time they make plans to come up here and stay, something happens, and I just wonder if even this year we'll see them. Like, we're still trying to get the visit from that was meant to be at Christmas last year, and so we haven't seen them for, a couple of years now. So it'll be a couple of years, at Christmas time. So, and every time they're meant to come, it's like 2 or 3 days out, and of course something happens and they can't come, or the borders close. So I don't know. I really don't know, but I'm sure that there's other people that are worse off, so I shouldn't complain. So today's picture is Cinderella, and so I thought with Cinderella, you got to talk about shoes, don't you? So I thought today's story would be shoe-based. So it's a story that takes place in Sydney back in the 1930s, so we're going back. And we're going back to 1933, in fact, when Mrs. Elizabeth Willis made her way to David Jones' department store. Now, David Jones is like a luxury department store. If you're in the UK, it'd be like a cheaper Harrods, a way cheaper Harrods, but still sort of like the luxury and the specialised service that Harrods has. It's not a Marks and Sparks, it's a cut above. And I'm really not sure what to compare it with in the US, maybe Barney's, I'm not sure, but it's a very nice department store. It's been around forever and a day, and the Sydney branch is exceptionally beautiful. Opposite a park, there are other branches in other states now that are in modern shopping centres, but that's not really important. It's just a large department store where they sold a variety of things, and they still do. So she wanted to get some new shoes, and she toddled into the shoe department of David Jones, and she asked the sales assistant for some help. She had a large bunion on her toe, and it was really playing up, and she wanted something comfortable to wear. So she spoke to the shop assistant and explained that she needed really comfortable shoes for walking, and particularly to take into account that she had this bunion on her big toe, and she wanted the shoes to be closed in so that her foot and that awful looking bunion was completely covered up. So the sales lady provided a selection of 3 shoes for her to look at, and she recommended in particular a pair of shoes and said that it would meet her needs to cover the bunion and also be comfortable. So she tried on all of the shoes, but she actually went with the one that the sales lady recommended and felt that they were very comfortable and they covered up the bunion, and she decided that she would buy those and paid roughly £2, 5 shillings for them, and left the store. Now, what's really important is that she told the sales assistant the reason why she wanted the shoes, and she recommended a particular pair based on what she told her. Out of the choice of shoes, she actually recommended a particular pair. So Mrs. Willis took the shoes home, and she only wore them a couple of times, and actually it was only the 3rd time that she wore them in a 9-month period, so clearly she doesn't walk that much, after purchasing them, that when she was out walking, the heel on the shoes came off and it broke, and she was actually going down some stone stairs at the time. So consequently, she fell and she broke a leg, and she ended up in hospital for 20 days, which is really quite a long time. And back in the 1930s, I can't imagine what their conditions would have been like, but anyway, that's where she ended up. So, of course, 20 days is a long time to lose being in hospital because of a shoe breakage. So she decided that she would sue David Jones because she had broken a leg. And of course, those shoes were still broken too, so she still didn't have a pair of comfortable shoes. And even though it was 9 months after the time, or nearly 10 months then, she decided that she was going to sue, and that was that. So most times you would think that you would sue for negligence, but she didn't sue for negligence, and I can understand the reason why, because negligence in Australia was sort of just coming into its own, if you like, and there's a lot more elements or a lot more things in non-fancy pants way that you need to prove, and it's so much easier to sue sometimes under other pieces of legislation where you don't have to prove quite so much and the legislation already sets it out, whereas negligence is common law and it's not set out in. So she decided to sue under a piece of legislation called the Sale of Goods Act, and that's pretty self-explanatory. It's basically when you buy goods, a normal person, a customer or a consumer, buys goods from someone that sells those sorts of goods, then you get certain protections in those particular types of contracts. And so she decided to sue under that piece of legislation. And the reason was, in that legislation, there's something called an implied warranty. So basically a fancy pants way of saying, even though it's not clearly set out here, there is a promise that when you buy these goods, that they should have certain characteristics about them. And one of those characteristics is that they should be of the condition and quality that you would expect and fit for the purpose that you buy them. So if you buy a Mixmaster, it should mix up things that you put inside the bowl and work as intended. So if you make known to the person that is selling things to you at the time of buying the goods what they're for, then you're covered by this piece of legislation, especially if you rely on their judgment and they're in the business of supplying those goods. So if I buy a pair of shoes from a shop that basically sells pharmaceuticals and doesn't really specialise in shoes, and they've just got a couple of pairs of shoes there, they're not really in the business of selling shoes, and so I wouldn't really be able to rely on this legislation for that, because that's not what they do. So they can't be expected to know those goods, if that makes sense. And the other thing is that you need to have told or at least communicated in some way to the seller what you're going to use those goods for. So it doesn't have to be expressly, you don't have to say, I'm going hiking up Mount Kilimanjaro with this, but you need to sort of let them know in some sort of way, whether it's implied or you actually tell them or show them pictures on your iPhone or whatever of what you're planning to do. So there needs to be some sort of communication there. And there's also an implied warranty as to the condition of the item. So if you spend, and there's a number of factors in this, if you spend like $20 on a Mixmaster, you can't really expect that Mixmaster, because of the price, to last 20 years. Now saying that, I still have the same Mixmaster, and it's not even a Mixmaster, it's one of those handheld two-pronged little Mixmasters. I don't even have a stand mixer, and I have been using the same Mixmaster that I paid $15 for 30 years ago, so price is not always reflective of how long a product will last, but I think you get the point. If you spend $5 for a pair of shoes, you probably can't really expect them to last more than a year, so you wouldn't be suing if they fell apart. But £2 5 back in the 1930s was actually quite a lot of money for the shoes. And David Jones, as I said, they're in the business of selling shoes, and they're actually known for their good quality items. As I said, they're more of a luxurious department store than other department stores that might be around. So Mrs. Willis clearly told the salesman what she wanted the shoes for. She wanted them to go walking, and they needed to be comfortable because she had that awful bunion on her toe, on her big toe joint. And she was shown a selection of shoes, and the sales lady recommended one particular pair that would suit her needs. And she relied on their judgment call and also trying on the shoes herself and finding that they were comfortable for her. And David Jones, among other things, sells shoes, so she was quite able to sue under this piece of legislation. So at the trial, there was some evidence that the heel came off because the shoes were actually really badly made, and they were in an improper condition, meaning that they just weren't made very well. They didn't sort of satisfy the requirements of what you would expect from a shoe that had been very little worn for that period of time. So the court said that there was a breach of one of these implied warranties for fit for purpose, but also merchantable quality, which is what I talked about earlier, the condition, the quality, the price of the particular shoe. And so they sort of added to what she was suing for and said, no, it also breaches these ones as well. So the jury, which is unusual that there was a jury because nowadays there wouldn't be, but the jury said, yes, Mrs. Willis was really hard done by, and they found in her favour. But the thing is that they were allowed to decide on how much damages or money Mrs. Willis would get, and the figure they came out with was really inadequate, which is really strange because in New South Wales, for instance, in Australia, we've got rid of juries for things like defamation when they famously, in a defamation case, gave out far too much money in damages. But this time they actually gave so little that the court was like, what's going on here? So the court said there was a breach of these warranties, but they also said what the jury did in deciding the amount of damages was inadequate, and so they actually ordered a new trial just so that they could work out the amount of damages or the amount of money that Mrs. Willis should get for all that she suffered with these shoes. And so the full court agreed, and they said that there were also other breaches as well, and they got themselves into a bit of a tiz deciding on all of the things that were wrong with this case and her buying the shoes. And they decided that because there were so many issues that the matter should go to the High Court of Australia, which is the last point in call in Australia. Back in the 1930s it wasn't. You could still go to the Privy Council in the UK, but that was incredibly expensive, and you really wouldn't do that unless you were super keen. But they went to the High Court, and the High Court decided in favour of Mrs. Willis. They said that David Jones had breached the implied conditions of fit for purpose and merchantable quality. What they'd done was actually sold faulty stock to their customer, which caused her to fall down the stairs and break her leg. And finally it was sent back to the trial court, and this time the judge could work out the proper amount of damages, just like he'd originally said all those cases before and all those appeals before. So they went the long way about it, but they got there in the end. Now, I don't know exactly how much the trial court awarded because those documents aren't available publicly, but I imagine it was significantly more than the £2 5 that she paid for them, because she would have had all of that hospital care. She probably needed care at home and someone to help out So, and of course the shoes to replace, and interest on the money, and of course solicitors' costs and court fees, filing fees, all of that good stuff. So I don't know what she ended up with, but I'm sure it was a significant amount. But you know, it's often surprising the things that people will sue for when you think about, you know, the value of those shoes and going to the High Court. But it's not really about that. It's about all the other things, the cost of being in hospital, the cost of care and interest, the things that you might no longer be able to do because of that damage. And sometimes it's just the principle of the matter that you think that this thing is wrong and that someone should just pay for it, which can work out pretty expensive. But I think in Mrs. Willis's case, it was more about the other damages, those stays in hospital and her recovery afterwards, than the actual value of the pair of shoes, because that's a lot of court cases to go through for the value of the shoes. So I imagine she was seriously harmed. But anyway, that's the only Cinderella story that I have. So with the shoes, imagine if Cinderella had fallen down those stairs and really hurt herself with those glass slippers. Imagine the damage, all that glass inside, your heels. Who would you sue? The fairy godmother for creating those shoes? I mean, I don't know. I'd like to have somebody to sue. I mean, even a handsome prince is not going to look after you that well. But anyway, can you guys understand why people go to that sort of length to sue for a low value object? I hope that you can, because it's more about, as I said, the ancillary items and the value of the initial product. Sometimes people sue just to change the law. So back in the olden days, in these sorts of times, a lot of law needed more clarification than perhaps it does now. Still does. But often, you know, solicitors would get together and they would sue for particular things. But it's not as easy to sue for something as you might think. You have to have sort of a dog in the fight generally, and if you don't, you have to wait for a client to come along that's got a dog in the fight, so that you can actually run litigation that you hope will change the law. And usually you're doing that for free, pro bono, because you want to see how the law will change. Nowadays it's so much easier, because nowadays what most people do would be to go to their law reform commission in each state and tell them about the problem that they see in the law, and tell them the reason why that the law needs to be changed, and then people will go from there. So for example, about time's flying, so it must be about 10 years ago now, most states in Australia brought in laws about smoke alarms, because there'd been a number of fires in homes, and especially in rental properties, and if there had been a smoke alarm, people or property might have been saved. So, you know, obviously the big lobbyists for those sorts of laws are places like insurance companies that pay out, and also victims of those sorts of things, because if a smoke alarm had been working, maybe their loved ones could have been saved from a terrible fire. So governments brought in legislation saying, you know, every property had to have a smoke alarm. And it was drafted super quick, and when you draft things super quick, mistakes creep in. And the first big mistake with that legislation was that they didn't actually define what a property was. So when you were selling houses, even though it might be a vacant bit of land, there was nothing there, there was no buildings, nothing. You had to go and pop a smoke alarm in the middle of it, because the legislation said that every property had to have a smoke alarm. Now thankfully they got on board with that one pretty quick, when all the solicitors started saying, hey, this is ridiculous. I'm sending my client out to a vacant farm to pop smoke alarms in the middle of the dirt, basically. But you had to do it to comply. So thankfully they got on that one really quickly and identified, you know, what comprised a property. But sometimes silly things like that do creep in, and, you know, then there's people to fix. But so nowadays you would go to law reform commissions, which are basically a committee of solicitors and other people that might have an interest in certain things about changing laws, especially for crime and victims' compensation and things like that. And you would present your case, and, you know, they might pick it up and run with it, and then they would lobby the government to bring in legislation to change the laws, or to tighten laws up, or to clarify certain things, like that smoke alarms one that I gave you the example of. So luckily nowadays there's a lot easier ways than back in the olden days, where you often had many of the most famous cases in law were actually either pro bono, the solicitors didn't get paid because they wanted to see what the law would be, or they were solicitors themselves that had found themselves in a circumstance where they could bring a case to court to clarify what the law was. So lots of cases around that, or solicitors' wives, another big one that often appears in court cases, because hopefully hubby would give them, you know, free legals. But anyway, I hope you have enjoyed that little story for today. And I'm probably going to work on Cinderella off screen for a bit, because even though my hand is a lot better than what it has been, it's still not the best, and I don't want to overdo it. So I usually try and do 2 pictures every month for my colour along, but I really think I'll be struggling just to finish this one this month, so I hope you forgive me for that. And I really don't think I'll be able to finish this one on screen. I'll have to do quite a bit of it in little bits and pieces off screen, you know, 15 minutes here and there. Hopefully I'll get some time to work on it today. I've been told I have to make my Italian meatballs for dinner tonight, so it's actually always takes me longer than what I always plan, because rolling up all those little meatballs, I use an ice cream scoop, makes it so much simpler, but you still have to roll out all the little meatballs and then make them. And David wants some more cupcakes, so I have to make those as well. So in between Cinderella and cooking and cupcakes and taking Buddy for walks and whatnot, I don't know how much I'm going to get done today, but we'll see. Hopefully I'll be able to get a bit more done. And here's a bit more that I've done off screen, and I really think I should have thought about these colours a little bit more. I wanted something completely opposite to what I'd done on the right hand side, and I should have just thought about it a bit more. I can't sort of envisage where this is going now, so I feel a bit lost with this picture. But hopefully it'll work out, and I mean, I hope I don't make too many mistakes and have to rub too many things out, but we'll see. It doesn't really matter if it doesn't work out. I know that I'm struggling at the moment with my hands, so I don't want to overdo it and cause more damage, so it is what it is, I guess. But I think I'll do that fireplace chimney. I think I'll try and draw some extra bricks in there, because it kind of looks a bit weird with just the random bricks, I think. And I think those things near Cinderella's head, or cinders, I think they're garlic, so I'm going to try and do some sort of purpley type garlics, but we'll see. We'll see. I think I probably should have drawn some flames into that fireplace, but my drawing is just smiley faces, honestly, and stick figures, so I think the flames might be too hard for me. And I really don't know what I'm doing with her dress. I'm thinking red, but I don't know. There's not that many colours in the 60 set of Muji's, so I might need to pull out a few Prismacolors just to deepen the reds a bit, just to make it pop a bit, but we'll see how it goes. We'll see how we get there in the end, and I do hope I get this picture finished by the end of the month. Next time I will be back with a different story, and it'll be, yeah, something completely different. So for this channel, so we'll see how that goes. And oh, I forgot to tell you, I went into the city a couple of days ago. Actually went for a job interview. I got past the first interview, then went to the second interview the other day, and spent a bit of time walking around the Brisbane CBD, which I haven't done before. That was pretty exciting. I caught the train, and that was pretty exciting because I thought it would be like Sydney trains that are always late, dirty, and and you know, never arrive on time. But it was completely different. They were so clean and fast, and yeah, it was a really good experience. And unfortunately, it was pouring rain, and for the first time in my life, I've had to go to a job interview wearing a face mask, and I got wet as well because it was pouring rain and blowing a hurricane. And so I turned up wet, wearing a face mask because everyone is in at the moment in Queensland, and yeah, looking a little bit like a drowned rat, but we'll see how that went. I'm sure everyone else, you know, ended up the same that was being interviewed that day. Apparently there's quite a lot of people on the short list, so I don't know how I'll go, but we'll see. So that's it from me. Until next time, I hope that you stay safe, and I will be back maybe tomorrow with another video for my Asia in August. Until next time, stay safe and happy colouring.